moved a lot of House bills today and actually got to a few Senate bills. And probably the announcement at the end was probably the more monumental event. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Hey, before we have a question, let me apologize to Brian.
Oh,
He had a camera there, and I was goofing around and I covered it up, and that wasn't my intent to cause any problem. I hope security didn't get after you. or anything. That was my dull sense of humor.
I've never seen Senator Stevenson play around. So, yeah. So. Anyway, let's open it up to questions. We'll start with Brian's first then.
Well, your reaction to the numbers. I mean, the numbers, it looks like, tell me if we're wrong, Utah seems to be still, even with the prison, awash in money. Is that fair to say?
Well, we wouldn't say a wash, but our economy's doing well. Go ahead, Senator Stevenson.
I was just going to say, if you look at the request for appropriation that we've got, and I can get you some of those numbers right after we go through the appropriation subcommittee or committee reports today. There's a lot of asks out there, and a lot of them are very legitimate, and many of them will go unanswered before the session is over. There are a lot of needs, and we still need to be very careful about putting one-time money in. We will not put one-time into ongoing, but we need to be careful that we don't put too much ongoing money in place, just in case there is a downturn. I still get paid to be Dr. Doom, remember that.
Senator Stevenson, these numbers look like they're about $100 million higher than you had initially anticipated based on the income tax.
You're correct.
Can you explain where that $100 million came from all of a sudden?
As we go through the process, as you can imagine, keeping track of the amount of money we have to, it's just a cumbersome process, and apparently we didn't. I was using when we talked yesterday, I was talking about being off $300 million in tax collections, and in my head I was deducting the prison from 1.3 and then 3 from that, and apparently arithmetic at the Layton Elementary School is different than it is down here at the Capitol.
Well, if you could speak to that consensus revenue process and how obviously it's not just straight up math, right? If you're 300 million short in revenues, you don't just take 300 million off the earlier consensus figures. But it looks like the numbers have been massaged somewhat to get to a better position than the layperson would think, given that you're again down 300 million in revenues.
I don't believe there's been any massaging of the numbers. I think these are facts. When I say consensus, I'm talking the numbers from the State Tax Commission. I'm talking numbers that come from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and I'm talking the numbers that come from our Legislative Analyst's Office.
So again, these are predictions. They aren't actual numbers. So our budget year starts at the July 1, which is 3-4 months out, and then it goes all the way till June 30th of 2020. So we're trying to predict out a 16, 18 months out into the future, and so that's hard to do because you don't know how fast we're going to grow. But I think, as you heard the Senator Stevenson on the floor, our economy's growing. It's moving. And in a normal year, you look at these numbers, we've got $519 million in the education fund over last year. That's not a bad year.
And I think as you look at the process of the consensus numbers, that team has done in the history of their predictions and how they've arrived at their numbers in the past, they've been incredible.
I use the term massaging though, I'm trying to understand so I can explain to people how you fall $300 million short in revenues, and yet you only have to clip off $200 million in your agreed upon revenue estimates. I assume there's some kind of, if massaging is not the right word, maybe there's another one, but there's some kind of a metric that is used to,
That's the math difference between Layton and the capital.
Should that,
Well-
that include the prison? I guess that's my question.
This number does not. We've still got to take the prison off of those bottom two numbers.
And that, you said, is 135?
It's about 135, 100.
I thought it was 350 total.
150. 350 total.
350
And
total.
part of that's ongoing. There was, you know, that may be where I missed it, is the additional, see, there's 110 million of that prison money that's ongoing. So that won't come out until next year's budget.
okay, this is Las Vegas elementary school math, but
Oh, this is
when I added up these numbers and took off the 350, it goes to 745. And this morning we were talking about taking off the 300 or 350 and getting to 650.
Like I say, I was.
So that's about $100 million
The
difference.
1.3 billion isn't down to the note. That's just what I was using, and
Right.
if I misled anyone, I certainly apologize.
No, I
But,
just want to understand that what goes into putting together these
Well, these
estimates.
numbers
so
are
they're
based
not just a
on-
straight up mathematical.
They have some
subtraction.
models that they use,
Yeah.
and they use monthly income numbers from the State Tax Commission. Income tax would include the fees that we're taking in. It would include the income tax, income tax, sales tax. All of those numbers would be, and then they put this in this model, and they wrap it around a couple of times, and then what comes out the other end is sort of gospel. The problem we've had since the tax cuts or the federal tax changes were made, the problem is that a lot of people tried to, and I guess if massage is the wrong word, game the system's probably wrong too, but a lot of people paid their taxes early in order to pick up a federal deduction on their income tax, because see, that's been taken off now. So in trying to pay that, we actually had an acceleration last year, and those numbers are just kind of drifting in now. It's slow. Tax returns are not coming in as fast as they did a year ago, and we think that's what's caused the downturn. In other words, we're not. This is just a behavior caused by a reaction to a one-time deal, rather than a trend. I think that's the difference in why we're seeing these numbers change.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Lisa.
so just to be clear, and I think your last statement may have answered my question, but just to be clear, in coming up with these consensus numbers, that idea that, okay, the money isn't there as it should have
That's
been in
correct.
income tax, but we are counting on.
Well,
income.
no, there's no. There
But
could
we
have been
think it
some
will be.
changes since that.
Yeah.
See, that report came out
Yeah.
on the 15th, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that we have.
Yeah,
We really won't know total, I think, until the first quarter's filed, or until taxes are filed in April.
but this assumes though that
That's correct.
some of that money, okay.
Senator Maine, any comments?
I was just thinking, you know, we have formulas, we have models, but we do the best we can starting forward. And I think the conversation when we first started the session was, these are the monies we're counting on, but our appropriations are huge. So the conversation we had in all the appropriations, you know, do what needs to be done. And then as time goes on, if there's more money, then we'll add more, you know, appropriations, and we'll add on to that. That's how you start. And if you don't start, we're going to fund everything, and then they're disappointed at the end. So what needs to be done? And you look at, especially, I'm in infrastructure. Those buildings are expensive, and we need to do some really structural things and build new buildings and do what we need to do that cost the most money, I think. And as we move down, if there's more to do, we're funding as we go. And I think that's a prudent thing to do. And I think that's where we started, you know, do what needs to be done, see what the numbers are, and then we'll enhance what we can as we go.
So just to be clear, you said 350 million still for the prison to rather than bond.
That's correct.
So if you do and the 350 is one time, ongoing, a combination of both?
It's a combination.
A combination, roughly,
There's the ongoing partial is 110 over 2 years,
okay,
and then the difference would be one time.
one time. So given all that, does that then speak even more, I don't want to say forcefully, but for lack of a better word, does that speak more to not having a tax cut? this
Oh,
year?
gosh. That's above my pay grade at this time. I just need to get a balanced budget.
And again, I'll say it one more time, I think the tax cut is dependent upon how broad of tax base we get for the tax reform, okay?
Does
So,
the,
Go ahead.
taking out the jail, does that leave the general fund in a deficit then?
Now, the prison, when we originally put that together, we felt that we would need bonding of up to, I think it was $585 million. And part of those bonds have been let. But to show you how strong the state is right now, that is the only bonds the state of Utah, or the only dollars the state of Utah owns on buildings. Every building we have on every campus, every state building is paid for with the exception of the prison bonds, and that's roughly $300 million that we owe.
And the reason, again, we put 100 and how much? 110 of ongoing?
We put 110 ongoing, so there's 110 this year, and I think maybe that's where Lisa's question lies with me, because that other 110 won't come out till next year, and I was using the prison as a lump sum, and that may be where your $100 million is.
So it'll take 2 years to build the prison, so that 110 will be used this year. Then the ongoing money stays in there, another 110 next year, and then that 110 will be available. And again, our thought process has always been, because we know that we have cyclical general fund, that we put ongoing money into those one-time expenses. When that money becomes available in 2 years, we may be in an economic downturn. And if we are, we can pull that money out and backfill, held education harmless, do those type of things. And then we can bond for the rest of the prison. So it's an effort to try to manage our cash flow.
President, this morning you said that $1.3 billion number was too good to be true. Even though the economy is strong and you're not in a deficit, you're still growing. You're just not growing as fast as you anticipated.
So they're good numbers, but it just seemed like it was too much money, and it was. Okay.
And we really believe that was caused by this tax switch that the federal government made a year ago. And it really has fouled our models up. Our models have been very good. They've been very close to the last 2 years. But
We just need to be very careful that we don't overextend ourselves into a time that might not be as good. I think we're going to do everything we can to help that.
So if you remember at the beginning of the session, we were saying we won't spend it all. We're going to try to take some and put it on some ongoing money, put it into one time, because of the fact that we were concerned if those numbers didn't seem to be sustainable. Maybe that's a better word than too good to be true, but either one sounds okay. You can quote me, it'll be good for the paper.
the headline of not true is better than the headline of not sustainable.
But
well, it means the same thing, right?
It does.
That and as you're saying, you anticipated when you saw those numbers that you needed to be cautious.
So wasn't it a really good thing we were?
It seems like the vast majority of this surplus is in the education fund. Can you talk about maybe the level of flexibility you have with the overall surplus and funding other things? I mean, is basically all this money available only for education in schools at this point?
First, can I chaste? Do not use the word surplus around me. This is anticipated revenue, is what it really is. And to your question, remember when we start putting this together, we're putting together a budget in the future. We still haven't put a WPU together that's $31 million per percent. We haven't taken into account student growth. We haven't done growth in our universities. We haven't paid state employees. We haven't covered increasing insurance costs. So when we get all those big pieces put together, that number is going to look a lot lower than it is. But you're right, our income tax is growing in the state, and you just have to look around the state and see the growth going on. Income tax is going to grow because there's just a lot more people with good jobs in Utah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because if you look at the numbers on general fund, 52 million of one time, 477 of education fund, general fund 178 million of ongoing, 392 of education fund. That's why we're looking at tax reform. because we're seeing the income tax, but we're seeing the fact that because the GDP, because the percent of sales tax per GDP or per personal income is going down. Again, people, instead of buying lawnmowers, paying for their lawn to be mowed, lawnmower has sales tax with it, paying for the lawn to be mowed doesn't. Because we're seeing that erode and become a smaller portion of our gross domestic product, we're having to figure out how we solve that problem, because it's going to continue to decline even though our economy is strong. So that is the whole reason we're looking at tax reform.
Yes,
So that question just is a question we're asking ourselves.
And
Okay.
I was just going to, if I may, Mr. President.
Yeah, go ahead.
Speak to the education fund. I think people they're maybe thinking of the school and the teacher, and that's true, but that fund is so huge and it has so many components in it, and there's pay and there's children and there's care, and I mean it's just so huge. So it encompasses many things that you wouldn't even think it's education related, but it is. So a lot of money's come out of that for all kinds of different things.
So, other questions?
Some new details coming out about tax reform, that medical services would be a
The speaker's
excise tax.
back. He's not sick today, so we'll see what the House does. Hopefully he'll get us something. I don't know when, but he'd probably be the one to ask.
If there's no questions for me, I really need to slip out. We've got an EAC meeting. We're going to start here in about as soon as I get there, I guess.
Okay, any further questions? If not, I think we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.